There was a time when she barely noticed your presence, when your calls, your messages, and your attention were just background noise. But now as she stares at her phone, scrolling through old conversations, something feels different. There's an emptiness where you used to be. She didn't think it would feel like this. She thought she was making the right decision. But that's the thing about loss. It rarely feels real until it's too late. Today we're breaking down exactly why women only feel the loss once you've walked away, and how understanding this can make you the kind of man she never forgets. Let's get into it. Number 1. The illusion of permanence. Most people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. When something is constant, it becomes easy to overlook. You were always there, so she assumed you always would be. It's not malice, it's human nature. People get comfortable. They believe that what is familiar will remain. And that belief is where they go wrong. She didn't think twice about your presence because she thought she had all the time in the world. But time is never promised, and neither is a man who knows his worth. When you finally walk away, not to punish, not to manipulate, but because you refuse to be unappreciated, she is left to confront a truth she never expected. You are not as permanent as she assumed. And that's when it hits her. At first she brushes it off, thinking you'll return like you always did. She convinces herself that this is just another cycle, that you'll reach out eventually. But days turn into weeks, and silence fills the space where you once existed. She scrolls through old messages, replays memories, and suddenly, everything she took for granted is now what she longs for the most. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." The Stoic man understands this, not just about life but about relationships. You are not a fixture in someone's world. You are a choice, and if they fail to see your value, you have the power to remove yourself with dignity. A man who internalizes this truth does not cling. He moves with certainty, knowing that appreciation often arrives in the silence of his absence. There's a moment when she realizes she was never entitled to your presence. That good morning text a privilege, your unwavering patience a gift. The way you showed up, listened, and cared, that was never owed to her. It was something you chose to give. And now, she feels the absence of everything she once ignored. A Stoic does not wait for recognition. He does not plead for appreciation. He understands that his value is not determined by someone else's delayed epiphany. He leaves with grace, knowing that those who truly see his worth will cherish him before he's gone, not after. Number 2. The silent void you leave behind. Life goes on, she's still busy, still surrounded by distractions, but slowly, the weight of your absence starts to creep in. The little things, your voice, your presence, the way you made her feel grounded, are now missing. And in that silence, reality sets in. At first, she might even feel relief. Maybe she thought she needed space, that she wanted something different. But time has a way of peeling back illusions. The dates with new people don't feel the same. The attention from others doesn't hit the same way. The way you made her feel safe, valued, understood was rare. And now there's nothing filling that space. That's when the lost becomes real. Not in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet ones, when she realizes that no one else makes her feel the way you did. This is the moment most men never allow to happen, because they don't truly leave. They linger, hoping to remind her of what she had, before she even has the chance to feel the void. They send a final message, looking for closure that won't come. They try to force her to see their worth. But the strongest man understands something deeper. True value is felt in absence. Not in presence. They walk away not as a game, not as manipulation, but as a statement of self-respect. They know that nothing shakes a woman's soul more than realizing she lost a man who was truly irreplaceable. Seneca reminds us that true strength is found in restraint. The weak man begs to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be missed. The strong man, he understands that silence is its own lesson. He lets it do the work for him. The moments of emptiness, the longing, the comparison, these are far more powerful than any words could ever be. A man who knows his worth does not chase validation. He does not demand recognition. He lets time reveal the truth, and when it does, she will feel it. Not as a fleeting thought, but as a deep and undeniable realization. And by then it might be too late. Now take a moment to reflect. Have you ever witnessed the power of your own absence? Have you seen how stepping back changes the dynamic? Share your thoughts in the comments below, or if you simply want to let this message sink in, leave this sentence in the comments. True value is felt in absence. Let's see how many of you understand the strength in walking away. Number 3, the law of diminishing attention. Think about the last time you truly appreciated something that was always available to you. Maybe it was a warm embrace, a good morning text, or simply knowing that someone was there whenever you needed them. The more abundant something is, the less we value it. It's human nature. And the same principle applies to relationships. When you were present every day, texting, calling, showing up, your presence became expected. It lost its weight not because you weren't valuable, but because familiarity breeds complacency. She assumes you'll still be there, just like you always have been. But the moment you pull away, something shifts. The absence begins to settle in. Suddenly, the attention she once dismissed is missed. The conversations she used to brush off feel like a void in her day. The small moments she barely acknowledged, the way you remembered her favorite coffee order, the way you listened when she vented about her day, start to echo in her mind. She may not even understand why, but something feels off. She expected you to be there, and now you're not. That's the paradox of human desire. We rarely treasure something until it's slipping away. This is why distance can be more powerful than presence. When something is constant, we assume it will always be there. But when it's taken away, we are forced to recognize what it truly meant to us. This is why people reminisce about old loves, regret lost friendships, and suddenly crave what they once neglected. Seneca once said, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." But let's be honest, gratitude often arrives too late. We appreciate the warmth of the sun only after a long winter. We long for silence after being surrounded by endless noise. And we recognize the depth of someone's presence only when it becomes a memory. A Stoic man understands this truth. He does not demand appreciation. He does not chase validation. Instead, he creates the conditions where appreciation becomes inevitable. And that means knowing when to give, when to step back, and when to disappear completely. Not out of manipulation, not as a game, but out of self-respect. Because a man who respects himself does not plead for attention. He becomes the kind of presence that is felt, even in his absence. He understands that love and desire cannot be forced, only inspired. And sometimes, the greatest lesson you can teach someone is to let them feel what life is like without you. Then and only then Does the realization hit the void is undeniable? She may distract herself, rationalize it, convince herself she's fine, but deep down a shift has occurred. She starts wondering, did I take him for granted? Did I underestimate his value? The same person she once assumed would always be there now feels like a loss. And that's when she understands some things. Some people are not so easily replaced. Number 4, emotional dependence exposed. She thought she was independent. She thought she didn't need you. But now in the quiet moments, when the excitement of her distractions fades and the world isn't pulling her in 100 directions, she feels something she never anticipated: loss. It's not just about missing your presence. It's about realizing that the emotional stability she took for granted was something you brought into her life. You weren't just another man. You were the calm in her storm, the presence that made her feel safe, even when she never admitted it. And now that you're gone, she's left alone with thoughts she can't escape. This is where she starts to question everything. Did she truly want to push you away? Or did she just assume you'd always be there? Was she chasing an illusion of something better, believing she had endless options? If that were true, then why does the silence feel so loud now? Why does she catch herself reaching for her phone, hesitating before sending a message she knows she shouldn't send? Because now she's beginning to understand something she didn't before. Your presence wasn't just comforting. It was rare. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." But here's the thing, Stoicism teaches us that while we accept change, not everyone does. When you walked away, you embrace the natural flow of life, understanding that detachment is sometimes the only path to self-respect. She, on the other hand, is just beginning to wrestle with that change. She thought she was in control, but now she's realizing control was an illusion. You were never desperate to stay. You were willing to leave. And that, my friend, is why she feels the loss so deeply. She thought she could replace you, that another man, another moment of attention, would fill the space you left behind. But it's not that simple, is it? A man of true value, a man of presence, doesn't leave just a gap. He leaves an echo, a memory that lingers, a weight that no one else seems to lift in the same way. And the longer the silence stretches, the more she starts to understand. She didn't just lose someone. She lost you, and there's no Stoic lesson, no philosophy, no words of comfort that will soften that reality. She has to sit with it, just as you once had to sit with your own lessons, learning to master yourself before anyone else could define you. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." A Stoic man does not beg, does not plead, does not seek validation. He offers his presence freely, but never at the cost of his own dignity. And when he leaves, he does so without resentment, knowing that his silence will teach the lessons his words never could. And now she is learning, so now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where your silence spoke louder than words? Where walking away wasn't about punishment, but about reclaiming your own sense of self? Share your thoughts in the comments below. What resonated with you the most? Or if you just want to leave a mark, drop this in the comments. A man of presence leaves an echo. Let's keep the conversation going. Number 5, the unexpected return of curiosity. Curiosity is a powerful force. When something is always available, we take it for granted, but when it disappears, we start to wonder, what is he doing? Who is he with? Has he moved on? And the moment she starts asking those questions, she is no longer in control. She is reacting to your absence. She is realizing that you were not just a passive part of her life. You were a presence that shaped her experience. And now that presence is missing. It's in that silence and that space you've left behind that the weight of your absence truly settles in. At first, she may not notice it. She fills her days with distractions, laughter, and maybe even the attention of others. But the thing about genuine presence is that it's not easily replaced. No amount of surface-level interactions can truly substitute for the depth and security she once felt around you, and with time, that realization begins to haunt her. The true power of detachment is not in ignoring someone. It's in becoming someone they can't ignore. A Stoic man understands this. He knows that mystery fuels attraction. But more importantly, he knows that true strength lies in self-sufficiency. The greatest mystery of all, a man who does not seek validation, who does not chase, who simply exists in his own world untethered. This is where so many men fail. They believe that presence alone holds power. But in reality, it's the ability to remove that presence that creates a lasting impact. Think about it. How many times have you realized the true value of something only after it was gone? When you could no longer access it at will. When you were left to sit with your own thoughts, wishing you had appreciated it more when it was there. That's exactly what happens when a man who once gave his energy freely suddenly withdraws it, not in bitterness, not in pettiness, but in quiet confidence, in the unshaken certainty that his worth does not depend on her recognition. That kind of man doesn't plead, doesn't convince, doesn't wait around hoping for a change of heart. He simply steps away and lets time do its work. And that's when she feels it, the absence, the void, the questions that won't go away. Was he really that easy to replace? Why isn't he trying to win me back? What if I was wrong about him? This is the paradox of emotional detachment. It is not coldness, it is control. It is the understanding that your presence should be a gift, not a given. And when that gift is no longer offered, it forces appreciation in a way that words never could. Number 6, the ripple effect of your absence. Loss isn't always one big dramatic moment. It's the slow erosion of routine. The little things she never thought about before, until they're missing. The way you made her laugh at the right time, the sound of your voice, the reassurance that you were always there, even if she barely noticed. Now she notices, and it's unsettling. She thought she had the upper hand. She believed she could move on without a second thought. But as time passes, something shifts. She goes about her day as usual, yet there's an emptiness she can't quite explain. The inside jokes that once filled the silence are now just that silence. The small moments she took for granted, like the way you instinctively reached for her hand in a crowd, or the way your presence made everything feel a little more certain, now stand out in their absence. And this isn't something you forced. You didn't beg, didn't manipulate, didn't plead, you simply walked away. And that choice set off a ripple effect she wasn't prepared for, you see. People don't truly appreciate what they have until it's gone, and women, no matter how independent or self-assured they seem, are no exception. The security, the steadiness, the sense of being wanted without having to chase, these things don't just disappear from the heart. Overnight she may have thought she had all the power when she distanced herself, but real power isn't in clinging or controlling. It's in your ability to let go without fear. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. The Stoic man doesn't fight for someone's attention. He doesn't demand to be missed. He simply becomes the kind of man whose absence creates its own impact. And once that happens, there's no need for words. The weight of silence speaks louder than any conversation ever could think about it. When you step back, you give her space to realize what she lost. The late-night text she used to ignore. Now she wonders why her phone stays quiet. The comfort of knowing you were always an option. Now she feels the sting of uncertainty. You never had to convince her of your worth. Life is doing that for you. This is where you hold your ground. No angry messages, no grand gestures to prove anything. Just presence by absence. Because when a woman truly starts to feel the loss, it's not when you're still reaching out, still trying to make her see your value. It's when you're gone. When your absence creates a void so undeniable that she can't ignore it. And by the time she realizes what she lost, she also sees something else. You never needed her to see it because you always knew. If you've made it this far, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever experienced the power of silence? In your own life, have you ever walked away, only to realize later how much of an impact your absence truly had? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your perspective. Or if you just want to let me know you're here, type. Real power is in letting go. In the comments, your engagement helps spread this message, and who knows, your insight might resonate with someone who needs to hear it today. No, 7 social proof works against her. She thought she was the prize, but now she's seeing something different. Other people see your value. You're not broken, not waiting around for her. You're thriving, and the reality she once ignored is now impossible to deny. You were never dependent on her. She was just a part of your world, not the center of it. She believed you would chase, that you would linger in her orbit, hoping for another chance. But instead you vanished from her life like a ghost. Not in anger, not in desperation, just in quiet, unshakable confidence. And that's when the weight of her choices starts pressing down on her. This is where doubt begins to creep in. Did she misjudge you? Did she assume you'd crumble without her? Because right now, it's looking like you're doing better than ever. And that realization hits harder than any argument, any confrontation, any desperate plea ever could. It's the silence that speaks the loudest. The absence of your presence is no longer a relief. It's a void she never expected to feel. A Stoic man doesn't beg for recognition or fight for acknowledgement. He simply, as Marcus Aurelius said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. And when you embody that, when you focus on becoming stronger, wiser, and more disciplined, the world takes notice, so does she. Your value doesn't fade when you walk away. If anything, it becomes clearer. Because distance has a way of magnifying what was once taken for granted. She starts to compare. Other men might give her attention, but it's not the same. They don't have your presence, your self-assuredness. The ones who chase don't hold the same weight as the man who walked away without hesitation. And this is where it stings. Because now she realizes she never truly had power over you. The control she thought she had was an illusion. One shattered the moment you embraced your worth without needing her approval. This is the moment she feels the loss. Not when you begged, not when you tried to reason with her, but when you simply disappeared and thrived. The greatest power you have isn't improving her wrong. It's improving to yourself that you were always enough, with or without her. No, Kate, regret is a delayed teacher. Regret doesn't hit all at once. It builds. It starts as a whisper. A fleeting thought that maybe, just maybe, she made a mistake. Then it grows. What if she misjudged you? What if she acted too soon? What if she let go of something that was irreplaceable? At first she convinces herself it was the right choice. She fills her days with distractions, convincing herself she feels free. But emotions don't work on command. They creep up when she least expects them. On a quiet night, in an old memory, in the absence of your presence. This is the irony of laws. It teaches through distance. And now, she's looking back at you through a different lens. The flaws she fixated on don't seem so important anymore. The moments she brushed off feel more significant. The way you listened when she vented, the steady presence you provided, the small gestures that once felt routine. Suddenly, they stand out in stark contrast to what she has now. It's only in your absence that she begins to understand your value. But by the time realization dawns, you're already somewhere else. This is why walking away with dignity is your greatest power. The man who clings, who chases, who begs to be seen only diminishes himself. But the man who moves forward, who embraces the nature of impermanence, becomes unforgettable when you withdraw your energy. You create space for her to feel the weight of her own decisions. It's in that space that longing is born. The Stoics understood this deeply. As Marcus Aurelius said, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others. It is not theirs to guide you." A man who understands his worth does not wait for someone to appreciate him. He knows his value with or without recognition. When you stop looking back, you step into your true power. You become the man she remembers, not because you begged for her attention, but because you walked away and never looked back. And that's when it happens, when the silence is louder than words, when she starts to wonder if she let go of the one man who truly understood her. But by then the story is already changed, because you are no longer standing still, waiting for her to notice. You are already gone. Have you ever walked away from someone who only recognized your value after you were gone? Have you ever felt the shift when silence spoke louder than words? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, or if this message resonates with you, simply type 1 Know my worth. Let's see how many of us understand the power of moving forward. No, 9 You become the standard. She moves on, at least that's what she tells herself. She convinces herself that life continues, that she meets someone new, that time will erase whatever feelings she had for you. And for a while it seems like she's right. She's distracted, entertained, and surrounded by options. But then something shifts. The reality creeps in slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle she didn't realize was missing parts until now. You set a standard, and the more she experiences what's out there, the more she realizes men like you don't come around often. At first she's convinced she'd be fine. She tells herself there's always someone else, someone new, someone better. But deep down she starts noticing the difference. The way you carried yourself, the way you never reacted out of emotion, but with purpose, the way you made her feel safe. Not just physically, but emotionally. Like she could truly be herself. She didn't have to question your intentions, wonder where you stood, or decode mixed signals. You were clear, consistent, and unwavering in your presence. She meets new people, tries to fill the void, but something feels off. The excitement of fresh attention fades. Conversations feel shallow. The way these new men carry themselves lacks the same depth. They're either too eager or too indifferent, too emotional or too unavailable. She realizes how rare it is to find a man who embodies both strength and restraint, who can command a room without seeking validation, who can be present without being overbearing. And it starts to haunt her. She keeps searching, hoping to find that same energy, that same presence, but it's rare. Because what she had with you wasn't just about attraction or fun, it was about security, respect, and a deeper sense of connection. And the more she looks, the more she starts to wonder, had she already met the best? A man of true value never begs to be recognized. He doesn't chase, he doesn't plead, and he doesn't try to prove himself. He simply exists as a force of stability, strength, and purpose. Like a mountain standing firm while the storm passes, he remains unmoved by external validation. Seneca once said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." The Stoic man understands this, and so does she eventually. At first she thought losing you was her decision. Now she realizes it was her loss. Because when a man moves with self-respect, when he remains disciplined in his actions, he leaves an imprint that time cannot erase. And that's the thing about absence. It creates clarity. She thought distance would help her forget you. Instead, it made her see you more clearly than ever before. She sees now that you weren't just another option. You were the exception, the kind of man who doesn't need to remind anyone of his worth. Because his actions, his presence, and his absence speak for themselves. And by then it's too late. No. 10. The power of staying gone. The final and most important lesson: never return to a place where your absence was the only thing that made you valuable. You don't teach people to respect you by leaving and then rushing back the moment they notice your absence. You teach them by moving forward, by showing that your worth was never dependent on their recognition. The moment you decide to walk away, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, you shift the balance. By the time she realizes what she lost, you've already evolved beyond the version of yourself she once knew. That's the beauty of walking away, not as some manipulative game to trigger regret, but as a necessary step towards self-growth. You don't disappear to make her miss you. You disappear because you've recognized that staying where you weren't valued was a waste of your potential. And once that realization sets in, there is no going back. She may eventually wake up to what she had, but by then you'll be out of reach. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've outgrown the need for her validation. The obstacle is the way, as the Stoics say. Every setback, every rejection, every moment of pain is not something to run from. It is something to absorb, to learn from, to use as fuel for your transformation. There is no greater revenge than success, but even revenge is an illusion. The real goal is to become so grounded, so focused, so complete within yourself, that you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Think about it. How many times have you seen it happen? The moment a man finally stops chasing, finally redirects his energy into his own life, into his own goals, that's when she starts noticing it's not magic. It's human nature. People don't value what's always available. They value what they feel they can't have. And nothing is more attractive than a man who is truly content on his own path, who doesn't seek external validation, who radiates the kind of calm, confidence that only comes from inner peace. And that is the true power of walking away. Not to manipulate, not to prove a point, but because your life is so fulfilling, so rich with purpose, that going back is no longer an option. You don't just move on, you transcend. At the end of the day, the greatest lesson here is this: your presence should never be taken for granted. When a woman assumes you'll always be there, she naturally starts to devalue you. Not because she's cruel, but because human nature makes us overlook what's easily accessible. But the moment you withdraw, the moment you stop making yourself an option, a shift occurs, the absence becomes undeniable. And that's when she starts to feel what she never thought she would regret. But here's the real takeaway. You don't walk away to teach her a lesson. You walk away because you've learned yours. You've learned that chasing validation only diminishes your value. That trying to make someone see your worth is a waste of your energy. But a man who respects himself doesn't beg for appreciation. He simply removes himself from places where he isn't valued. This is the paradox of emotional detachment. Your power is not in forcing someone to recognize what they had. It's in becoming someone they can't ignore. Your silence is more powerful than any argument, any plea, or any attempt to convince. Because time has a way of revealing the truth. And when it finally does, you'll no longer be waiting. So here's what I want you to take away from this. You are not a backup plan. You are not an afterthought. You are not someone who waits around, hoping for someone else's realization. You are a man who knows his worth, who moves forward with purpose, who understands that true power lies in self-respect, not in chasing people who don't see your value. The men who win in the long run are the ones who don't need to be validated by anyone but themselves. They walk away with dignity. They focus on their growth. They become stronger, wiser, and more focused. And in doing so, they create the kind of presence that lingers, even when they're no longer there. So don't be the man who waits. Be the man who thrives. Because once you truly embrace your worth, the right people will either appreciate you before it's too late, or spend their lives regretting that they didn't. If this video spoke to you, take a second to hit that like button. It helps more men find this message and step into their power. And I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know. What was the most powerful insight you took from this? Have you ever experienced this dynamic yourself? Let's get the conversation going. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more content on self-mastery, relationships, and Stoicism. The journey to becoming your best self never stops. Finally, check out the recommended videos on screen. They'll help you take this understanding even deeper and continue evolving into the kind of man who never has to chase, because his presence is always felt, even in his absence. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and remember, the man who knows his worth never has to prove it.